Why did the Titanic, built in 1,200 days, sink in just 2 hours? April 10, 1912, was the day when the world's largest and most expensive ship, the Titanic, was fully prepared to begin its maiden voyage. On that day, the Atlantic Ocean was extremely calm, and there was no chance of a maritime storm. The ship had already boarded 1,500 passengers, and millions of people were standing at the docks to witness the start of the Titanic's first journey. Neither the passengers nor the millions of people bidding farewell, nor the Titanic's crew knew that the ship, which was about to set sail in a short while, had been built with 6 mistakes that would lead to its catastrophic disaster. In today's episode, viewers will once again learn about the 6 major mistakes made with the most expensive, luxurious, and powerful ship of its time, the Titanic, which, if not made, might have made the Titanic famous in the world, not for its crash, but for its success. What were the 6 mistakes that even Captain Edward Smith, who had 40 years of experience, failed to notice? Leaving aside the captain's 40 years of experience, these mistakes were also overlooked by the White Star Line company operating the Titanic, which had experience operating 107 ships. Moreover, these mistakes were not noticed by Harland & Wolff, the company that manufactured the Titanic, which had built over 500 ships prior to the Titanic. Construction of the Titanic began in 1907, and after nearly 3 years and the hard work of 2,000 workers, the ship was completed. The ship was fully ready, but the testing phase was still pending. The builders' confidence in the ship increased further when the Titanic successfully passed its first test run. Following the successful test, it was marketed in various newspapers around the world with the headline Unsinkable Titanic, meaning that a ship that would never sink had been built. The ship's maiden voyage was scheduled to start from Southampton, England on April 10, 1912, with New York City as its destination. The cost of traveling in the Titanic's economy section was $30, while traveling in first class cost $150, which today amounts to 340,000 rupees. As a result of this marketing, all tickets were suddenly booked, and finally, the day arrived when the Titanic was set to begin its maiden voyage at exactly 12 noon. The Titanic commenced its first journey, and soon after, the ship's mistakes began to surface. Captain Smith had received a deadline from the owners to reach New York by April 17th, just 7 days away. Because of this, the captain maintained a very high speed from the start, which was the Titanic's first major mistake. Due to the instructions and pressure from the owners, Captain Smith had to reach New York as quickly as possible because it was the Titanic's maiden voyage, and failing to arrive on time would significantly damage the Titanic's reputation. Any vehicle, machine, or ship has several operating procedures, including speed limits, which should have been part of the Titanic's journey from the beginning. In a short while, the ship had left the port of Southampton so far behind that nothing was visible except the blue sea stretching far and wide. The Titanic had been sailing for 3 days, with only brief stops in France and Ireland, and had been continuously heading towards New York for the better part of the last 24 hours. It was the evening of April 14th, 1912, and silence and fog enveloped the sea, significantly reducing visibility. That same night, another ship, which was just a few hours ahead of the Titanic, had warned the Titanic's captain via wireless about icebergs floating in the sea. Experts believe that this warning was given at least 6 times, but due to the negligence of the wireless operators, these extremely important warnings were missed. For them, it may have seemed normal, but this was the second mistake of the Titanic's crew. The Titanic was the first luxury ship of its kind, and many VIPs were on board, which is why most of the Titanic's crew was busy serving first-class passengers. If these warnings had been taken seriously, the entire scenario could have been different. The ship was also traveling at a high speed, and it had already missed a very important warning. The Titanic was now rapidly and fearlessly moving into the range of the iceberg, but it could still have been saved from the accident because the lookouts were alert and ready to inform the captain of any iceberg sighting from a distance. However, they did not have one essential item for distant observation: binoculars. Yes, the lookouts were alert, but they could not see the iceberg from afar due to the lack of binoculars, and this was the Titanic's third mistake. Captain Smith learned about the iceberg when the ship's lookouts reported that there was an iceberg the size of a football field directly in front of the ship. However, it was already too late because the iceberg was extremely close. In the Atlantic Ocean, ships often encounter such icebergs, which large vessels can usually handle easily. Perhaps Captain Smith thought the same. Upon receiving the iceberg report, Captain Smith ordered the engines to be stopped and also gave the order to change the Titanic's course. Indeed, Captain Smith made every effort to avoid the iceberg, but the distance had become so short that any action proved futile. The iceberg had now collided with the center of the Titanic, but there was still a fair hope of survival. There remained the hope that the iceberg might not damage the ship's body, or that the iceberg might break apart upon impact. This could have happened if the Titanic's fourth mistake had not taken effect. Experts believe that the rivets used in the Titanic's body were made of cast iron, not steel. These rivets were meant to hold large pieces of iron together, but since cast iron is softer than steel, the rivets at the point of impact where the iceberg struck the Titanic's body opened up due to pressure, leading to the very outcome that Captain Smith had feared. Mistake number 5. The Titanic had collided with an iceberg as large as a football field, and water had begun to fill the lower part of the ship. This dangerous collision had alerted the entire crew and passengers, as well as Joseph Bruce Ismay, the owner of the Titanic, who was on board. Undoubtedly, water had begun to fill the Titanic, but there was still hope for its survival because the Titanic was designed in such a way that even if 3 of its floors were flooded, it would not sink. Unfortunately for this ship, water had crossed 3 floors and reached the 4th floor. The situation was now beyond control. The Titanic was slowly sinking into the ocean. Now it was time to save the passengers on board. Without worrying about the ship, Captain Smith issued an emergency alert over the radio. A plan was made to shift the passengers to the lifeboats while waiting for help to arrive. However, at this moment, the 5th mistake became evident. Yes, there was space for a total of 32 lifeboats on the ship. Due to negligence, only 20 were provided. There were 1,500 passengers and only 20 boats. Chaos reigned everywhere, and everyone wanted to board those few lifeboats. At 12:45, the first emergency boat was launched into the sea. But here, another, 6th, mistake occurred. In the midst of the chaos, the boats were launched without being fully filled, prioritizing mostly first-class passengers, meaning the wealthier individuals were seated first. If more passengers had been accommodated in the boats, fewer lives would have been lost. The ship was rapidly sinking into the sea. At 2:18, all the lights on the Titanic went out due to a short circuit, and in the next moment, the ship broke apart into 2 pieces. It took the Titanic 2 hours and 40 minutes to completely sink into the sea, resulting in 1,500 people drowning in the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It is also important to note that the water temperature at that time was -2 degrees Celsius, meaning that even if passengers jumped into the cold water, there was no chance of survival because a person cannot survive more than 30 minutes in such low temperatures. It is said that the number of dead was significantly higher than 1,500 because many people who were familiar with the ship's crew boarded the ship without ticket. Among the survivors, the majority were children and women. On the other hand, Captain Smith was constantly engaged in saving people's lives, and he was the last person to jump from the sinking ship. We hope you will also like and share this video. Thank you so much for your loving comment. See you in the next amazing video.